The old lighthouse stood empty on the frozen coast, its lamp room dark for years, a place the local fishermen cursed in whispers.
"You'll die in that tower, stranger," the old fisherman said. "The sea's already chosen you."
Joseph looked at the rusty key in his hand. He had lost everything already. What more could a curse take?
The villagers watched in grim silence. They all knew the story. Every keeper who had lit that lamp had perished.
"You hear me, stranger? That lighthouse is a tomb. Go back south while you still can walk."
"There's nothing south for me," Joseph said, his voice flat. "I've already made my peace with the worst."
He turned away from the cluster of cottages and began the long walk along the frozen shore. The dog fell into step beside him.
His hand closed tighter around the key. This was the only door left open to him.
The lighthouse rose ahead, a black column against the gray sky. Behind him, old Jonas shook his head and spat into the snow. The village had seen another fool walk into the curse. The iron key scraped in the frozen lock, and the heavy door swung inward with a groan that might have been a warning. Darkness swallowed them. The moment the doors slammed shut, the sound echoing up through the stone shaft.
"Easy, boy." Even the air felt wrong, thick with old salt and something colder underneath.
They climbed the iron spiral stair, each footfall ringing like a hammer on a bell. At the top, the lamp room stretched cold and silent. The great lens stood like a dead eye in its brass housing.
The stove was colder than the stone floor, its iron throat choked with ancient ash.
A low growl rumbled from the dog's chest, its ears flattened toward the keeper's quarters door. Joseph forced the warped door and found a narrow bunkroom, a rusted cot stripped bare. The mattress had rotted away years ago. In the stillness, a sound reached him, so faint it might have been the wind or a whisper from the dark spiral. Joseph held his breath. The sound didn't come again, but the dog's hackles stayed raised along its spine.
"Just the wind," he muttered, though his hand didn't leave the dog's neck. "We'll get the stove going." There was enough coal in the bin for a few days. After that, the cold would own the room again.
While exploring the lower level, the dog stopped dead before a heavy arched door, a rusted padlock sealing the iron hasp.
"What's behind here?" He threw his shoulder into the timbers. The door didn't budge.
That night, the wind died and the tower fell silent until the tapping began. 3 distinct knocks from somewhere below. The dog growled low, staring at the stairwell. Joseph gripped the handle of a rusted clasp knife.
There were no loose shutters down there, no broken glass to rattle. This tower knew visitors it didn't want. "Show yourself," he called into the dark. Only his echo answered, falling away into the stone.
Dawn found him slumped against the cold lens housing, the dog still watching the stairs. He hadn't slept. He searched the keeper's quarters again, dragging a salt-crusted sea chest from beneath the stripped cot. Inside lay a leather logbook, oilcloth wrapped. He carried it to the lamp room, where the stove held a faint warmth. The final entries were scrawled in a trembling hand. The fever took Morgan and Hale, the cold that comes from within. It doesn't leave. A later line, almost illegible. "I am the last. The lamp will go dark. The tower knows we are here."
The cold from within. That wasn't weather. That was something inside these walls.
He crossed to the tall window. The sea had turned to iron, and the northern sky was a bruise gathering.
A blizzard was marching in. "If I leave now, I'll freeze before the shore path ends."
Wind rattled the glass. Across the bay, the village lights winked out, swallowed behind a wall of driving snow.
Curse or no curse, the storm had me. This tower was the only thing between me and the ice.
He turned to the locked storeroom door, its padlock dark with rust. The first full gust shook the tower to its stones. He wrestled a driftwood beam into the iron brackets, bracing the door against the howling gale.
That's not giving way. The tower's built like a warship.
Upstairs, he shoved torn blankets into the window frames where frost was already biting through.
The curved stone trapped the heat. No corners for drafts to bite.
The stove threw a steady warmth, and the lamp room became the warmest place he had been in months.
Outside, the storm was murderous, but in here, it felt like a different world.
He looked through the ice-scored glass. The cottages across the bay were vanishing under a shell of white.
They'll freeze tonight. This tower, it's a fortress.
He turned from the window. The locked storeroom pulled at his thoughts like a tide.
If this place was built for a siege, maybe there's something down there worth more than a ghost.
All day, the gale hammered the tower walls, and Joseph counted out the last of the coal. His supplies wouldn't last another week. That evening, the tapping came again, a sharp, rhythmic beat from somewhere below.
Not this time. He descended, knife in hand, and followed the sound to a warped shutter on the seaward wall. All night, this shutter had been playing the ghost. Not the tower, the wind.
Joseph wedged the shutter tight, then turned to the storeroom door. The real threat wasn't ghosts, it was starvation. He found an iron bar among the driftwood beams and forced the chisel end under the hasp.
Come on. The rusty screws shrieked, and the door groaned inward a finger's width.
The dog's head lifted, ears forward. Whatever waited behind that door, both of them would see it.
One more, he growled and threw his weight onto the bar.
With a crack, like a gunshot, the padlock sheared free and the door swung wide into a great darkened chamber. He lifted the lantern, and the light crawled across stacked barrels, wooden crates, and rows of dust-thick tinned goods.
It was a survivalist's dream. Untouched lamp oil, hardtack, salted stores. Enough to last months.
He stepped inside, the dog sniffing eagerly at a crate near the door.
They left it all. They left everything. Why would keepers abandon a stronghold this well stocked? Unless the curse was something else entirely.
He pried open a tin of hardtack. The biscuit was hard as stone, but untouched by rot.
This wasn't a tomb. It was a last bastion.
His knees gave way, and he knelt among the crates, a stunned laugh escaping his salt-cracked lips.
For the first time in years, he let himself believe he might not die here.
The dog wagged its tail, and Joseph pulled a piece of salted fish from a barrel, sharing the first real meal of their new life. He found a dozen sealed cans of lamp oil, still full. His hand rested on the cold metal, and an idea began to form. He set the can beside the great sleeping lens and stared up into its dark brass heart.
If I light it, it might attract attention. But in this storm, who would see it except those lost?
The dog's ears went flat. A horn call, faint and frantic, reached them through the howl of the wind. Joseph climbed the iron stair, the wind growing louder with every step. Below, a fishing trawler rolled in the troughs, its mast splintered. The crew were beating their hands to stay alive.
They'll never make it without the light. That lens must burn.
He turned from the gallery and descended, his mind already working the mechanism.
The wick needed oil. The gears needed grease. But he knew the old design.
Outside, the horn sounded again, closer this time. He had to try. He knelt before the mechanism, wiping frozen grease from the gears with his sleeve. The wick was brittle as charcoal. He soaked it in fresh oil until it softened.
The key was rusted to its housing. He had to force it. Come on, he turned the key. The striker sparked once, twice, and died. The oil hadn't reached the wick, priming it again.
He turned the key again. A blue flame bloomed, fed on the vapor, then collapsed into nothing. The dog whined, pressing its nose to the floor. The horn outside sounded closer, desperate.
No, No, no. He struck the key again. Nothing. The cold had thickened the oil too much. I need to warm it.
He fumbled for the oil can, hands shaking. The lamp remained dark, and the storm screamed on.
The margin of the logbook held a scrawl he had barely noticed. In bitter cold, prime the wick with extra oil.
He drenched the wick until oil pooled in the brass cup, then opened the air intake fully. Letting the cold blast mix, with a muttered prayer, he turned the key. The striker sparked, and the lamp exploded into a shuddering wall of gold. The great lens shuddered in its iron cradle, then began its slow, majestic rotation, scattering refracted light across the stone walls. The beam shot out like a molten sword, carving through the driving snow and spray, visible for miles. A horn answered. 3 triumphant blasts, closer now, no longer desperate, but knowing it had been seen. Joseph sank against the railing, his coat black with oil, his breath coming in, ragged sobs. The dog finally wagged its tail, pressing into his leg as if to say it understood what they had done.
The tower no longer a tomb. It was the heartbeat of the coast, aching to beat again.
He watched the beam sweep the white chaos, and for the first time since his wreck and ruin, he felt like a man who had built something. Through the frost-scored glass, he saw the trawler's mast snap and the hull slew toward the black teeth of the rocks. He tore the bar from the brackets, grabbed a coil of rope and a storm lantern, and threw the great door open into the gale. The beam swept the water, briefly lighting the black rocks. He could see figures clinging to the stone. He pushed into the white fury, the dog at his heels, the lantern flaring and dying with every gust. On the shoreward rocks, the fishermen were half buried in freezing slush, their hands too stiff to hold the rope he threw. One of them lifted a dead-looking hand, and Joseph caught the wrist before it slipped back into the foam. He hauled the first man upright, then the second, dragging them toward the tower's outline through the driving snow. A wall of snow broke against them, but the door was ahead, the warm glow of the lamp above promising refuge.
Thought we were dead. His teeth chattered so hard, the words barely came out.
Joseph pushed them inside, the dog barking them across the threshold into the heat of the tower. Joseph fed the stove until it roared, then stripped the fishermen of their frozen coats and wrapped them in keepers' blankets.
We saw the beam cut through the blizzard. We thought it was a ghost light leading us to the rocks.
No ghost. Just an old lamp and a man too stubborn to let it stay dark.
He brought out hardtack, salted fish, and hot broth. The fisherman ate shakily, the cold finally releasing its grip.
He never imagined the cursed tower could hold such warmth, such defiant life. The village is frozen in. Most boats didn't make it back. We thought we were the only ones left alive on the water.
Joseph listened, staring into the stove's red heart. His tower was the only beacon for miles.
If more men are out there, this light might be their only chance.
You saved our lives out there. You've given us back the world.
Outside, the gale howled on, but inside the tower swelled with more than one heartbeat for the first time. The beam kept sweeping, and by morning a second boat had found the rocks, its crew stumbling toward the tower's promise. The lamp room became a hospital, the storeroom a kitchen. Blankets and broth passed from hand to hand.
There were more boats out there. If they see the light, they'll come. But the village won't know to look.
If I try to reach the village now, I'll be dead before I cross the bay. The light is the only message I can send.
He climbed to the lens and fed it more oil until the flame roared, a golden finger pointing toward the frozen village.
We stay. Keep the stove hot and the lamp burning. If our people are out there, they'll follow the beam home.
Across the bay, the cottages remained dark, their windows blind under the weight of the storm.
They're there, frozen in their beds, and they don't know the light is for them.
He portioned the stores carefully. 3 more mouths to feed, but the barrels still held. The dog lay at the head of the stairs, ears turning toward every gust, guarding a lighthouse now full of life. The 3rd morning broke clear. The wind had died, leaving a frozen, silent world. Joseph stood on the gallery, the snow-blanketed coast spread below. Footsteps crunched. A line of dark figures moved across the ice, hunched and slow. Old Jonas led them, face raw with cold, eyes fixed on the burning lamp. He saw the beam sweep, and his step faltered. The lighthouse was alive.
After all their warnings, they're coming to the curse. But what will they find?
He descended the iron stair, dog at his heels, and swung the heavy door open. The group stood 20 yards away, staring at the golden threshold.
You found the light, Joseph said, his voice unshaken. Come inside.
Old Jonas stepped through, his old eyes taking in the warmth, the food, the faces. He had no words. Old Jonas walked the round chamber, touching the warm stove, the stocked crates, the blazing lens. He found Joseph beside the great lens, and the old man's voice came out in a dry croak.
We were wrong. This place was never cursed. It was waiting for someone brave enough to light it.
Joseph met his eyes and said nothing for a long moment. Then he simply nodded. Old Jonas thrust out his hand, and Joseph took it. The dog's tail thumped the stone floor. The villagers looked at the lighthouse with new eyes, their old fears dissolving.
The curse was always just neglect, a tower without a keeper. His voice carried through the room.
The villagers nodded slowly, the superstition crumbling like ice in the sun.
Old Jonas gripped Joseph's shoulder. You've done what none of us dared.
The dog barked once, sealing the peace, and the lighthouse was no longer haunted. Word spread. The cursed tower had saved lives. Mariners charted courses toward its beam. Fishermen delivered fresh coal, salted meat, and timbers to mend the door. The village repaid its debt in kind.
The lighthouse wasn't a tomb anymore. It was the heart of the whole frozen shore.
Old Jonas helped hoist a red arrow onto the tower's crown. It pointed seaward, a permanent warning and welcome.
That arrow will tell every ship where the safe harbor lies. No more lost sailors in the fog.
Through the winter, the door never froze shut. The key hung on its hook, polished by daily use.
I came here, a wrecked man. This tower gave me back a life.
The storeroom stayed full. The lamp burned bright, and the dog grew a thick winter coat. Coastal captains began calling it the warmest place on the coast. And they were right. Standing on the gallery, Joseph watched the frozen sea. The wind carried only welcome now. One thick night, a great steamer wandered blind in the fog. The beam stabbed through the white, a thin gold path, and the ship followed it to safety.
They'll never know who lit that lamp, he thought, watching the distant running lights slide past the rocks.
Weeks later, a salted envelope arrived in the village, addressed to the keeper of the old Point Light. The captain's letter read, "Your light pulled us back from the reef. No one at the harbor believed the old tower still burned."
That's all the reward I need, he told the dog, turning the heavy bronze medal over in his palm.
He hung the captain's medal beside the rusty key on the iron hook by the door.
That key opened more than a door. It opened a life.
The lighthouse was no longer a cursed ruin, but a registered maritime aid. Though Joseph never cared for titles, he simply kept the lamp burning, the stores full, and the red arrow pointed seaward, a silent promise to any sailor lost in the dark. Years later, the lighthouse still burned, but the dog's muzzle had grayed, and Joseph's beard held more salt than stubble.
The logbook was almost full now. Pages of storms weathered and ships guided home.
He dipped the pen and wrote the final entry. They said this tower was cursed. They were wrong. It was a stronghold, waiting for someone brave enough to turn the key. He closed the worn leather and set the pen aside. The stove murmured its old song.
"Come on, old friend," he said, stroking the dog's graying head. "Time to check the lamp."
The dog rose stiffly but wagged its tail, following him up to the great lens, where the beam swept out over the black water. The beam pulsed steady, a heartbeat the coast now counted on.
It was enough. More than enough. He had found his purpose in the very place they told him would be his grave.
He checked the oil, fed the wick, and left the lamp to its vigil. The routine of a content man. A young boy from the village climbed the stair with fresh bread and stopped before the open logbook.
"You are reading the end first," Joseph said with a faint smile. "But cursed, not the way they told you. The only curse was forgetting what this tower was built for," Joseph said, his voice firm.
He lifted the rusty key from its hook, and the boy's eyes asked the question.
"A story can kill if you let it run dark," Joseph continued. "That tale nearly drowned good men on the reef. This tower only needed someone to light the lamp and trust the stone walls."
The boy turned to the window, watching the great beam carve its steady path through the darkness.
"That light has guided more souls home than I'll ever count. That's the only truth that matters."
The boy nodded slowly, and Joseph rested his palm on the gray head of his old dog. The lamp swept on, and the beam fell across the boy's upturned face, full of quiet wonder. Winter snow, spring thaw, summer fog, the lighthouse never failed to burn. Every night the beam swept the sea, a golden promise repeated in the dark. The red arrow on the crown pointed seaward, unchanged, a quiet sentinel. Inside, the old dog slept by the stove, and the lamp room held its steady warmth. Joseph stood watch, a still figure in the beam's path, his shadow long against the brass. The beam never wavered, a thin road of light across the black water. The village across the frozen bay slept safe, their lights a scattered constellation. Mariners called it the warmest place on the coast, and they were not wrong. What was once a tomb of superstition had become the coast's beating heart, and in the lantern room, a gaunt man with a gray dog kept the light, and the dark never won. On a windless winter night, Joseph stepped onto the gallery, the old dog at his heels. The great beam swept overhead, silent and steady, a familiar rhythm in the cold dark.
He looked up at the great lens, its brass heart still pumping gold through the tower's veins.
The sea stretched black and still beneath a scatter of cold stars.
"Home," he said, the word hanging in the frost.
The dog's tail gave a slow wag, thumping the iron floor once. He rested a hand on the gray head, then turned toward the open door, where warmth spilled out like welcome.
They stepped back inside, and the lighthouse swallowed them into the glow.
The door closed softly, sealing the cold out and the light in. Inside, the stove murmured, and the old dog curled up on the blanket, home at last. From the deck of a passing trawler, the lighthouse rose against the black water, its beam a clean gold line. The light swept across the hull, then swung away, steady as a heartbeat. Inside, the great lens turned, a quiet rhythm of glass and brass that never stopped. On the iron hook by the door, the rusty key hung alone, a silent promise. Some places aren't cursed. They're just waiting for the right keeper. A keeper who saw a fortress where others saw a tomb. And for every sailor lost in the dark, that light would always burn. The beam pulsed once more, a golden promise. Then the darkness swallowed the rest. The key still hung on its hook, worn smooth by years of turning. And the lighthouse never went dark again.